Jeff Wickwire, heard daily on Bible School Radio 91.3, KDKR, Decatur, Dallas-Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC, Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, so what do you do if you've been hacked? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, I can take a question live on the air. 1-877-913-5357. 1-877-913-5357. You can also go to the website at prudentmoney.com. Send a question into the Q&A link up at the top of the page. We'll get you taken care of that way. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for the Prudent Money e-letter. And that way we can keep you posted on what we put on the website. As well as go check out the podcasting section. And wherever you go to listen to podcasts, we'll be there on that platform. So if you miss a program, you can always listen to the podcast. And you can do so wherever you like to go to listen to podcasts. That's all at prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and they told me that they had gotten 3 different letters in 1 week notifying them that their personal information had been hacked. Now, when I say 3 different companies, I mean 3 different companies, same week. I don't think that I've ever come across or heard stories such as that there was 3 different computer hacks and their information was presumably stolen in those 3 different hacks. 2 of them were investment companies, and one was a Social Security. And it's interesting. I didn't hear anything about a Social Security break into the data files of Social Security. You know, the IRS went through a huge computer hack a couple of years ago, and I remember talking about this, roughly 3 to 4 years ago. Every time it would happen, there would be big news, be on all the front page of all the websites. I think Home Depot got hacked at one point and lost 60,000, roughly. They approximated that 60,000 consumer files were hacked into. Of course, 60,000 is nothing today when you look at how many are going down through the hacking process. What I find is that people take it differently. How should you react if your information has been compromised? You receive this notice saying it happened. What do? Well, most companies will provide credit monitoring. And they'll do so for a couple of years, 1 year, whatever it might be. And if you have credit monitoring, that will help you by telling you if someone is checking your credit for the purpose of opening up a new credit account. So that goes in. They explain to you how credit freeze works. And I think, as long as I've been doing this, I think that the credit freeze, when the government made that a federal law, that you could go freeze your credit reporting agency files, which you have 3 of them, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. And what happens is when you go and you freeze those files, they give you a code and you're the only person who has that code. So you're the only person who can open it back up. I think it's one of the best identity theft protection resources that we have, and that's brought to you by the federal government. I know, it doesn't happen all the time. So, but most people get real concerned about it. And I want to invite you to look at it a different way. We've talked about this, and sorry to bring it up again, but I'm just talking to more and more people who are starting to kind of wake up to, hey, this is a real problem. The point is that it's been a real problem for an extremely long time, a very long time. And it's getting to the point now to where a big computer hack doesn't even get on the front page anymore. It's kind of like, oh yeah, there was 320,000 people that had their information compromised, and they go on. So it's not really big news anymore. And I would suggest that is really a part of the problem, is that if you go back over the past 3 to 4 years, and I say this because the activity has really been picking up on these computer hacks. If you go back over the past 3 to 4 or 5 years, let's say, and you add up all of the various companies who have had their databases compromised and someone break in and steal consumer information, you would probably find that over 327 million people, that's the number of people in the United States, including people who don't even qualify for credit, which would be kids. And I would suggest that your information is probably already out there. And that's just the way things go today. It's just a risk that we have to guard against. But here's the problem, is that most people don't consider it. And I don't know why. I don't get the psychology behind this. That would never happen to me. I guess that could be one way to look at it. But they don't get it as concerned about it. And I'm not suggesting to walk around with fear that your consumer information may have already been compromised, more likely have been compromised, or you just found out it's been compromised. Not to look around as fear, because what's interesting is that I've had this conversation with many of my own clients who've gotten maybe a company that I use for investment purposes, and they've sent all my they sent all my clients an email, a letter saying, hey, your information has been compromised. So of course they look to me to know what to tell them, and so I'll get your pretty much your typical emails that say, what do I do? But most of which, I love the emails that come in and say, Bob, I already have credit monitoring. I do that in addition to, which is a little bit overkill, but still, it is not a bad idea. Credit monitoring, plus I have credit freezes on all 3 credit reporting agencies. And to me, besides using practical common sense, that's all you got to do. And there's also a little bit of confusion about fraud alerts. Fraud alerts only, you can put a fraud alert on your credit reporting agency, on your credit file, but it only lasts for 90 days. You have to renew it. I'm talking about freeze up your credit accounts. They stay frozen until you unlock it. And be super careful with the one place that I think these thieves are creating the most havoc, and that is your computer. And just be so careful with the links that you click and the places you go. Just be really careful, because I will notice that there's been a increase in the number of spam and dangerous emails with links in it that we get. And the biggest problem that I see with it is that they look so real. They just look so real. So just be careful. My opinion about how do you react to a situation like this is simply this. You take the steps, which freezing your credit, and if you're going to freeze your credit, you want to go in and take a look at your credit files before you do that to make sure that everything looks good, everything is like it's supposed to. You audit all three of them, audit them, and then you freeze them up. And then if you want to have a second layer of security on it, you do credit monitoring on all three credit reporting agencies, not just one, but all three. That would be assuming your concern is that the freeze on your accounts would fail. Now, I can't imagine a situation where that would happen, but you never know. So those two things, using common sense, being aware of that risk is a problem, a big problem, a growing problem, and that people want your information, and just stay aware of your information, what you're getting in the mail, what you have lying around your house out in the open. You know, never take Social Security cards outside with you, outside of your house. Have them in an important place that's preferably secure. And I think that's the best way to fight it. This is Bob Brooks, 1-877-913-5357. Up against the break. Stick around. I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, PastorChuck.org. At PastorChuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at PastorChuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, PastorChuck.org.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
We all want to finish the race of life well, but Pastor Greg Laurie says we can't rest on our laurels. This week on A New Beginning, we'll study the life of Noah and learn some valuable lessons on remaining steadfast in the life of faith. Tune in for insights from the series Heroes of the Bible this week on A New Beginning.
A New Beginning, weekday mornings at 7:30 here on KDKR.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Talking a little bit about consumer files being compromised. What do you do about that? And if you missed any of that part of the program, the first part of it, you can always go and check it out on the podcast and hear it at your leisure. You can find that at prudentmoney.com. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the stock market and what you need to be aware of. Another day today where the market was down. Not anything too terribly bad. A about almost 0.75% down for the S&P 500. NASDAQ a little over 1% down. Dow Jones a little over 0.5% down. There's just some issues that are starting to weigh on the market a little bit, and kind of taking away that enthusiasm that investors have had since the October low from last year in 2022. Things you want to keep your eye on. The Treasury bond, the 10-year Treasury bond, is extremely important to be watching the yield off of that, the interest rate. It's at right at 4% today. We want to keep an eye on that, because if that takes off, we have a problem, a real problem. One other thing you want to keep an eye on is the price of oil. It was down below $80 a barrel, I want to say as early as last week. Today is a little over $84 a barrel. We want to keep an eye on that. And it's interesting because prices at the pump have not fallen like they should have. But I bet you anything, though, if the price of oil goes up, the gas prices will go up as well. So hope that doesn't happen and the price of oil stays down there close to the 80s and 70s. But $84 a barrel, a little over that today. And then I believe tomorrow, almost 99% sure, some more inflation numbers come out. And the market's looking at that, looking at a big move, hoping for a big move down, but not surprised and maybe a little bit spooked if it goes up a little bit. At some point, inflation numbers are going to surprise you. And the market is acting as if all these problems are behind us. And that's the risk that you run. I've said this a lot of times. I'll say it again. The problem that we have today with the stock market is that we started a bear market cycle in January of 2022. And from the standpoint of that compared to other bear markets that were preceded by very large bull markets like ours was, it just doesn't look like it's complete. It looks like it has a long ways to go. Now that has been an extremely wrong opinion on my part, but I think it's something that we need to keep an eye on, as once again we want to be good managers of what God gives us, good stewards of what God gives us. So that's what's happening with the market. I had a question come in. We talked about what do you do if you are laid off with your 401k plan? And I think we started to talk about it, and the end of the program came up too quickly. So I want to go back over that and talk about what makes, in my opinion, the most sense. And then I want to make a comment about Wells Fargo off of another question that I get. We talked about that yesterday. So you leave the job, or you get the news that you've been laid off. You're asked to get your personal belongings and exit the building. So you got that long walk back to your office. Mind is kind of shuffled. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do, trying to let what just happened sink in. And you start to box up everything. You make sure you get everything out of that office, that you don't leave anything behind, because you don't want to have to come back. And you take off. That's what most people do. But they leave one of the most important assets they have, which is their retirement plan, at that old job. Now, granted, it's a highly emotional time that you go through. It's there's just a lot of anxiety, emotion, all types of that you go through. So you may not be thinking, but you got to consider that 401k plan, because you'll get hired on, go to work for another company, and your intentions will be, I need to get that 401k plan moved over. The problem is, yes, you could move that money from your old 401k plan into your new 401k plan. And if your new 401k plan can bring the benefits to you that a IRA can bring, then by all means, transfer it, roll it over to your new 401k plan. But what I have found is 401k plans in general just don't have the kind of strong benefits that I think that they should. They're just really a collection of investments with no rhyme or reason. So the difference between your three choices are to, number one, leave it at your old company. I wouldn't do that. Move it to your new company. Or 3, roll it over to a IRA that's obviously set up an account in your name at a brokerage company like a Fidelity or a Vanguard, Charles Schwab, something like that. Because you've got these 4 huge benefits at your disposal. Number one, you've got choice. And assuming that you're not moving to an advisor that's limited to what they can do, and you got to really think really hard about that if that's what you want. You can put your money into anything. Sky's the limit. You don't have that with a 401k plan. Or if you do have what's called a brokerage option, it's a little bit can be a little bit cumbersome to use, and the fees are a lot higher on that. Strategy. Probably my biggest problem with 401k plans is that they're built specifically for those that want to buy and hold. Buy and hold works sometimes, doesn't work sometimes. It's the way that it goes. But they don't really enable you to have strategy for risk, to manage yourself against risk. Number 3, expenses. You got to consider it. Although I do think that a lot of the people who talk about expenses being that you should go with something with Fidelity that's an index fund that has hardly no expenses. I think that you have to take your expenses and go, and what am I getting for it? And usually it's for risk management. And does that make sense? Then expenses aren't a big deal. But I wouldn't pay a bunch of expenses for something that you can't find the benefits for. Guaranteed investments. Something that you can't find really available in 401k plans. You've got income producing investments, you've got guaranteed investments. Depends on your risk level, really. The one piece of advice that I would ask you to make sure that you consider is that if you're working with an advisor and you're moving the money from the old 401k to an IRA, you don't want to do a parallel move. If what he or she is presenting to you looks nothing different, not a whole lot different between your old 401k or your new 401k, I would either leave it there or move it to the new 401k plan. You don't want to do what's called a parallel move. And regulators would also suggest to you don't want to do that because advisors have a fiduciary responsibility to provide a benefit and a reason for making that move. And so you want to make sure that there's a big, huge reason that makes sense that justifies you moving to an IRA and not just a parallel move. So just consider that. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.